Hello, everybody. Michael Silber here, Event Director in Enlit Australia. Today we're speaking with Ramesh Singaram, who is the President and CEO of GE Gas Power Asia Pacific. And we're very fortunate to have him here talking to us as a preview for his participation in Enlit Australia, March 16th and 17th in Melbourne. Ramesh will be participating virtually on a senior executive CEO panel focused on integrating renewables into the system. So welcome, Ramesh.
Michael, thank you for having me.
Good. Let's begin this by, if you could give us a kind of an overview of the major GE projects currently in the AP region. I'd really appreciate that.
Michael, thanks. Thanks for the introduction as well. I appreciate it. We gas power, we operate in more than 22 markets. I say markets, countries here in Asia Pacific, so quite wide, anything from India right to China and everything in between. So when we think about that, we're supported by 4,000 employees base. We've got actually 21 ongoing construction projects, building new power plants, and I say that's more than 15 gigawatts. We have about 8 plants where we operate on behalf of the customers. We have got 5 repair facilities, 5 JVs, and I can go on with it, but I think when you quickly find out what we are actually a global company with a very local footprint. And I think that local footprint is extremely important as we then partner with the key stakeholders of each of the countries as well to ensure that we are providing the solutions that you look at. Just on a quick prompt, in Australia, we do have a level 2 shop in Perth where we provide services for our aero fleet, extremely important aero fleet for supporting the customers there as well. So quick from a project standpoint, very active, and this region continues to show promise of growth.
Yeah, I really like that approach of the global but think local. It seems to be it always seems to be the best approach, and GE is particularly good at that. So moving from that, can you talk a little bit about the transition to clean energy and how it's progressing in the AP region and specifically in Australia, if you can?
Yeah, I would. Again, Michael, I just say when we think about energy transition, I say the bigger topic, if we elevate the topic, is actually climate change. And I say climate change is a global priority for all of us. And companies like GE, we take that really seriously as a technology provider, as someone who's about to integrate different players into the ecosystem to go find a solution. And again, I mentioned that because it's extremely important. The other piece I say as well is that 41% of global emission CO2 actually comes from power generation. It makes us more responsible in terms of finding that solution as well. Having said that, you'll find that in the next decade, this region will add about 22,000 gigawatts of additional capacity, right? So I think when you think about that, there's still a demand, there's still growth, there's still countries that just need basic electricity going on with their daily activities as well. So from an energy transition standpoint, there's no one size that fits all. We are in a multi-speed. Each countries are in different evolution of their progress. But the important piece is that each one, a lot of them, I say majority of them have set targets. So that's good. Similar to Australia, I think Australia set this long-term energy policy in terms of where they want to be in terms of carbon neutral, net zero in 2050. So I look forward in terms of the elections this year, in terms of how this progress through. But having said that, in terms of a lot of the countries here, when we think about the energy transition, I think a lot of countries have to balance between what they can afford, what's sustainable, and what's reliable. And we call this the energy trilemma. Right. Because not every country can do everything at one go, at the same time trying to meet the emissions as well. Because when you see the needs are a little bit different in terms of that perspective as well. But if I were to look back in Australia, right, again, before I go into Australia, I would just say from a GE standpoint, we support and advocate the strategic deployment of renewables. In fact, we support the growth of renewables as much as the world can afford it, as much as we can put out of it, right, in terms of output and so on, but complemented with gas power generation to support the dependable nature of gas generation, right? So I think you need both in terms of that in order to change the trajectory of climate change. And I think that's our intent, right? When I look back in Australia, I think we are involved in a number of projects where supporting the Australian government in terms of creating a hydrogen industry in Australia. So one of them is the Energy Australia project, where it's a Tallawarra B project. We are providing a gas turbine 9F being available ready to be able to fire hydrogen. And once that is fully operational, it will be the first 9F to operate with a blend of hydrogen and also natural gas. In addition to that, Territory Generation in Australia is also chosen our TM 2500 to be able to strengthen the grid as they support the hydrogen economy up there as well. So I think when you look at that, every country is in a different speed in terms of their plans for transition, but clearly from a GE standpoint, this is our view on a lot of these things.
A lot of what you said anticipated the next question, which is, what are you seeing as the biggest challenge in terms of the integration of renewables into the system?
You know, Michael, that's always the question, but at the heart of this piece here is the inherent nature of variable nature of renewables, right? When you think about the system operators who want to control when they get that generation from wind and solar, in reality, they cannot control it, right? So when the wind blows and when the sun shines, that's the time they would be able to get that form of generation. But what happens when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? How does the system keep up with this? So from a big part of this is the key part of integration. How do you keep a grid stable, right? So this is where, when we think about this, is when you integrate renewables into a system, you need to have some form of a complementary, dependable capacity that's always providing that fixed, dependable capacity. And with that, from a GE standpoint, we think about whether it's a nuclear form of nuclear in the form of gas generation. And with gas generation, I think enables you to really scale up renewable in a big piece of it as well. There's another piece here from a grid standpoint. You need some form of grid strengthening, and we see this in Australia, where you have enough generation, but the mix is different in terms of you have a high penetration of renewable, and then you need some form of a grid firming depending on time of day to provide that peaking power as well. So from our view is that, and the last piece I would put here as well, as we look at the grids were all formed at a time when the capacity or the generation were more fixed, and we never kept up. We look at a lot of the countries, and they never kept up modernizing the grid. So there's a huge modernization that needs to take place between the hardware and now with the latest software and applying AI and so on. So I think that's really to keep the system and make electricity supply reliable.
You mentioned before the role of natural gas in the transition. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? What do you see as the role of natural gas in this ongoing transition?
Yeah, so Michael, even in COP26, I think there was mentioned that as part of the energy transition, gas has a big role. So as our view is with regards to put as much renewable as possible, but the role of gas then becomes one where it enables you to provide that dependable capacity to accelerate the growth of deployment of renewables. So I think that's a big piece of it as well. From a gas generation standpoint, equally important in terms of providing an alternative switching. Some countries, as you look at, they're switching from coal. And as they switch to renewable, they also find that gas enables them to switch from coal to gas as well. So it provides you that large scale, large block type of gas generation that, as you provide, obviously it's not carbon free, but provides you a path to reduce emission, but with the view that as hydrogen and carbon capture gets developed, you can then deploy that as well. So the role of gas complements the deployment of renewable, in my view.
Yeah, I agree with that. So going a little bit further, and you've alluded to hydrogen already, but can you again elaborate more on your views on what is the impact of hydrogen, or what do you see will be the impact of hydrogen on the electric power system?
A lot of hype with hydrogen, as you can imagine. Hydrogen is viewed as the future fuel. But I would say what it has provided, it's provided an opportunity and avenue for a zero carbon fuel, not only in the power generation side, but I think when you think about the industries which is still using furnaces, it'll help electrify those industries as well by the use of hydrogen, right? So from our view, from that perspective, it clearly provides that path. Having said that, Michael, I would also mention that not all countries at this stage of the journey in terms of hydrogen is still trying to get to a price point which is affordable, right, from a supply standpoint and for what the countries can adopt as well. But certainly from a GE standpoint, we support hydrogen because hydrogen gives you that switching. It's a transition as we think about blending and so on. But from a combustion system of GE, I think we are very excited because we've got a lot of experience there. So we certainly support hydrogen just like how we would support carbon capture development and so on as well.
Yeah, I think we do all have to watch out for the hype around hydrogen because even though it's very important and very real, there is a lot of hype around it. Listen, I wanted to, Ramesh, thank you for your time. This has been a very interesting few minutes, and will serve as a preview for your participation on our panel, as I said, in March at the Enlit Australia. You'll be on the panel integrating renewables into the system. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I look forward for the event as well. Thank you.